Ma'am, we are live.
Okay. Good afternoon. Today we are going to discuss Motilal Kemmu's two plays, Nagar Udas and Shah, based on Kalhana's Raj Tarangni, a pioneer work of historiography written in 12th century Kashmir and translated by Dr. Pankaj Bhan as Esteem, Sorrow and Curse. To discuss the book, we are joined by a distinguished panel of speakers this afternoon. Professor Neerja Mattoo, Shri Ravi Kemmu, Shri Ashok Jailkhani, and Dr. Pankaj Bhan. A warm welcome to all of you. It is indeed my pleasant privilege to introduce the chair of this session, Professor Neerja Mattoo. Professor Mattoo taught English at Government College for Women in Srinagar, from where she superannuated as principal. A writer, translator, apart from contributions to anthologies and academic journals, she has 3 books of Kashmir short stories in English to her credit. The Stranger Besides Me, Contemporary Kashmiri Short Stories, and Kath, Short Stories from Kashmir. She was awarded an HRD Ministry Senior Fellowship to work on 4 Kashmiri women poets. Currently, Professor Mattoo is the chief editor of the quarterly journal, Miras, Meaning Heritage, which is devoted to Kashmiri culture. I welcome you all once again and request Neerja ji to take the discussions forward. Neerja ji.
Thank you very much, Usha-ji. It's my privilege to be part of this very distinguished panel. And I'm particularly pleased that this is going to talk about 2 plays by Shri Motilal ji Kemmu, who was a legend in his lifetime, and also how much he worked for the revival of theatre in Kashmir. I don't think his contribution has been so far acknowledged so well, but it's a wonderful thing that Pankaj ji has translated 2 of his plays, Nagar Udas and Shah, into English and brought these out in the form of a book, which is the subject of our discussion today. I'm looking forward to illuminating remarks from the other panelists, Shri Ravi Kemmu, who happens to be Motilal ji's son, and Mr. Ashok Jailkhani, who worked for a long time in the Doordarshan, and he's produced many plays, directed them. He's also a very well-known personality. So I think what we should do first of all is to ask Pankaj ji to talk about his book, and then we can proceed onward. Pankaj ji, will you do us the favor of talking about how this book came about? Because we want to know about it.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Mattoo, for giving me this opportunity for presenting the translator's perspective, which in other word means my perspective, my view of the book, my side of the story. I'll come straight to the question. Well, I think that the translator faces difficulties and challenges at broadly 2 levels. The cultural level, the cultural-related issues, problems, difficulties, etc. At the linguistic level, the language-related issues. At cultural level, he has to transfer the cultural aspects of the source text. That is the text written by Kemmu Sahib. Its dress, modes of speech, the class norms, the social norms, the overall social and cultural ambience of the time, and make them real in the translated text. At the language level, he has to use resources of the target language in ways that easily absorb the cultural features of the original text. Well, my own hunch is that it's easier for a translator to translate from language A to language B if both come from the same language family, the so-called same language tree. For example, it's easier to translate from Hindi into Bangla or vice versa, as they both came from the same language family. English is as good as an Indian language now, but even then it's sometimes difficult to convey the cultural nuances in the society, its moods, its ways of life, its social behavior, etc., into English. It takes a little more effort to do so. It's not impossible to do so, but it takes a little more effort on the part of the translator to do so. Well, in my translation of Motilal Kemmu's work, I did face these problems, the way all translators do, and I was no exception. But in my case, the challenge was a little more daunting, a little more difficult. As you know, the basic ideas, the source material for the two plays, A City in Sorrow and Curse, are taken from Kalhana's Rajatarangani, which was written in 20th century Kashmir, many centuries back. So the society that the play depicts, the culture, the language, these are not that of contemporary English, the Kashmir that we live in, but that of Kashmir of Kalhana's time, if not earlier. I have to account for this historical time gap and make it look natural in modern day English, both in cultural representation and in language. I have done my best, and it's for the readers to decide. But I'm happy that I have translated Kemmu's works and brought them before the English reading public for the first time. It's very surprising why it was not translated earlier in English. His works have been translated in Hindi and many other languages, but not English. There may be many reasons for it, and we're not here to discuss those reasons. It is strange that Kemmu's works have been translated into Hindi and many other languages, but not English. It's for the first time that at least two of his well-known plays have been translated in English. I'm sure other writers and translators will take up the challenge of translating his other works and bringing them up for English reading public, both in India and abroad. They deserve to be translated. They deserve to be disseminated within India and outside India for the English-speaking public. And I'm sure that at least some people, some translators, some writers will take up the cudgels to do that. Thank you.
And thank you very much for introducing this book and also telling us that you are the pioneer as far as the English translation of any of Kemmuji's works is concerned. It is rather strange why it wasn't done, but I suppose it is a daunting task. And you have picked it up, which is like, accepting a challenge. But translating a play is probably more difficult than translating a short story or poetry. And because as a translator, I also know how difficult it is to translate from Kashmiri into English. As you said correctly, translating from Bangla to Hindi or Hindi to Urdu is much more easy. But these are two separate languages with the whole grammatical structure, the whole vocabulary, everything is totally different. And then you also have to, as you said quite correctly, think of the cultural relevance. And also you have to try and put it in the other language. You've done a remarkable piece of work. I'm very glad. Now, I would like to, later on, we'll ask you more questions about the book, which I'm sure you'll be very happy to answer. But first, let me go to the other panelist. This is Shri Ravi Kemmu. Ravi ji, I have to introduce a little personal note here, if you don't mind. I have never met you, but I knew your father very well because we were all based in Srinagar, and he was the soul of the Cultural Academy at that time. And he's the one who actually brought the Bhan's work center stage. He's the one who picked up their idiom. He's the one who wrote remarkable plays using the Bhan's as theater, chorus, and other things. And then I had the pleasure of meeting him once in Jammu. He was not in Srinagar anymore. He had probably retired and he was in Jammu. And do you know what he was most thrilled about? This is the personal thing I'm talking about. He was thrilled about not your work, but about his grandson. He said, "Haven't you seen my grandson?" I said, "No, how could I see him? I don't know where he is." He said, "No, but don't you see that advertisement? Likhte likhte love ho jaye." And then I paid attention. He was a child's actor at that time. And
Yes,
Kemmu
yes.
Saab was not proud of his own work, but he was proud of the talent of his grandson. That touched me very much. I remember clearly. So Kemmu Saab, of course, you know him much better. And I'm sure you have a lot to say, and we are all ready to learn from you. Because you see, I'm sorry we didn't see much of Kemmu Sahib, only officially, because he used to come to the Government Girls Women's College sometimes to guide our students when they were putting up some plays in Kashmiri and other things. He was the most unassuming, gentle, modest person I know. So, Kemmu Sahib, please tell us about your father.
Thank you, Neerja ji, Pankaj ji, Ashok ji, and I am thankful to all great personalities, some in front of the camera and some behind the camera listening to us. I'm so happy that this conversation about the two plays which have been translated by Pankaj ji of my father, Motilal Kemmu, one Nagarudas and Shah. Well, we can read the plays and we can know the content, but something behind the scene, what we call, I want to share certain moments about certain things which maybe people are not knowing, and I knew about my dad. Well, everyone knows that my dad started his career as a dancer. And at that time, I don't think he had any idea of writing or going into the theater and activities like Band Pathar and other things. During that course, he was discovering himself, and he was very conscious of the atmosphere and the political, social, and other scenarios of the state he was born in, along with the country, the great India. When he went to Baroda, I think something changed there, that he was into acting, and his professor C.C. Mehta told him that if you want to continue as a director and theatre personality, you should start writing. Now this, as all of us are writers and somehow related with the writing, so it becomes difficult to think where to start from. Now, if I tell you, I can tell you that the first plays Mr. Kemmu wrote, they were absurd plays. So he started with 3 one-act plays, all absurd. Darpanantapur ka Nange Sandhya Biti. Then he came to Kashmir. He was discovering himself. So he wanted to associate himself with the tradition he has been given in J&K and the political and economical and the social atmosphere around his day-to-day life. So he must have been struggling to find a way to communicate himself to the audiences through the art he was having. So he went to the folk form. So he started discovering bands. He started writing plays on the Bandapathar, which was totally almost lost. Because I have the smallest, because it's, I think in 64, 63, when I was just in second, third, fourth primary, I could see Muhammad Swan Bhagat and his people coming to our house, but I didn't know what they were exactly doing. And for me, at that time, the image of the bands was like aliens, because they had big, huge white headgears and, that's traditional costumes, and they used to come and they never used to enter our rooms. Well, Kashmiri mein kehte wuz, they will sit at the doorstep. So I don't know, maybe they were conscious of their low profile in life. But from that onwards, the bands and the Bandapathar, when they started performing in Cultural Academy and won a lot of awards and applauses, so he was ultimately handling about I think 50 theatre band groups in Kashmir. And after my NSD, I also became like his student. I also worked with Bumai bands and the National Vatora bands and the Kingdom bands, and I got interested in the form. Somewhere, when after doing NSD, I also used to ask him the questions about my Kashmir or, history of Kashmir, theatrical art forms. So many a times we talked about Kalan's Raj Tarangi. He gifted me one, but I could never read it at that time. And when I think he told me, he said, you are my son and you don't know about Kashmir, anything about Kashmir. You don't know Raj Tarangi. You don't read it. So how will you know about the history of Kashmir? I said, yeah, that's a big question. It's not, there are many people like me. So he thought, okay, let me do I'll attempt to write some plays now on Raj Tarangi. Till he passed away in 2018, he had a dream of writing about 12 plays. He said, I want to complete 12 plays based on Raj Tarangi. And I think I have completed 7 or 8, and a couple of them are in the process. Now, like the second play in this book is Sharp, which is from the initial Tarangas of the Raj Tarangi, and the second, a city Nagar Udas, is based on the 7th. Leaving aside the historical part, what compelled him to write the plays? Like when I was talking about Sharp, I said, what is the one line? What he said the states in today's country, India, should never confront the center. Because if the state government confronts center, the people's life will become miserable and there will be a lot of disturbances. Maybe when he was writing that play, the state administration of J&K was in, takraw with the central relationship. So I said, good. So now then when I wrote that play, I said, how this Damodar goes and fights Krishna. That was his interpretation. Even at the time when he was writing Nagar Udas, he wrote the first act of Nagar Udas was written, I think, in 1979. And I was doing a workshop at the time, and he presented the first act of Nagar Udas in Tagore Hall. Okay, it was just an exercise for students, and we did it. When he completed the play, it was in 1997. So it took him about 20 years to complete the play because he never got inspiration to write the second, third, and fourth act. So where did that inspiration come from? That inspiration came to write the second, third, and fourth act of Nagar Udas only after we were kicked out from Kashmir. So I think the second, third, and fourth act of Nagar Udas is the first 3 acts of a big play which have been written in exile. So the effect on the mankind, the effect in the daily life of us, of the people, of the similar people living in Jammu in exile, created that momentum. And he completed the 3 acts of that play in lesser time that took him to complete the first act of the play. And then he shared one thought with me. He said, what happened historically? I said, what? He said, the day I completed my play and I wrote the end, it was the same day when Shri Sharif was burned to ashes. So it coincided. I said, so what is great in that? He said, you read my play, you will come to know. Then I read the play. I said, what were you referring about? He said, I am referring about the historical fact when in the same play, Anand Dev is in Bij Bihara and his son burns the whole Bij Bihara. I said, is it something like history repeats itself? He said, well, that's up to you people. When you present the play, you can say about it. So, in short, that he started from absurd plays. Then he started writing on the folk form. Bandapatra, he revived it. Then in between, he wrote some realistic plays, Lalbatra, Lolare, realistic and social plays. And he again then he shifted to historical plays. He was always in search. He was always in search of new themes, new plays, and because he wanted to communicate with the new trends and the new audiences. I'm thankful to Mr. Pankaj, who took an effort to translate these 2 plays, and I must congratulate him. That translation really is not an easy part, particularly of a language which most of us only speak and we can't write it. We can't read. Kashmiri, we can't read. I can't read it. I can't write it. I cannot write it. We don't have a dictionary. It's not being taught in the schools. Many words are multiple. We don't know the English meaning or Hindi meaning of many words. But thanks to Pankaj that he took this effort. And along with Pankaj, I want to thank Gauri Shankar Raina also, because he was also the personality who took an effort to translate this play into Hindi, which was again a very difficult task because most of the plays written by Motilal Kemmu in Kashmiri have been translated by Gauri Shankar Raina, except a few which were translated by Shri Toshmani. So Pankaj, it was a great effort. I have read the play and I really liked it. And I should thank you once again for this tremendous effort and energy you have put behind this play in giving your sweet touch in English and making it come out in the form of the book. Thanks once again.
Thank you, Kemmu Sahab. In fact, I should have mentioned about your own achievements. But I got so carried away by the image of Kemmu Sahib, the grandfather, that I didn't mention it. I must, for this, you see, information of all the listeners or the people who are watching this program. Mr. Ravi Kemmu is a distinguished director, actor, and also he, for me, what is special not is not his film appearances in Rajniti or Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, but his being a part of that production of Bharat Ek Khoj, which was done by Shyam Benegal, and Ravi ji was very much a part of that whole setup. This was an adaptation of this great book by Jawaharlal Nehru, Discovery of India. And that was my first introduction to Ravi ji. And in fact, I complimented his father when I saw him. Said that wonderful that he's associated with directors like Shyam Benegal. But since then, he has gone many places. He's a distinguished person and everything. And also, you see, I liked your the whole story of what Kemmu Sahib was thinking of when he was writing these books, and also this prophetic quality in great writers that they can sometimes visualize things which we take a long time to really discover. And this parallel with the Rar Sharif episode is so telling and everything. Once again, we should be very grateful to Pankaj for having translated it into English. And I must say that I enjoyed thoroughly. The only other play which I enjoyed thoroughly was the production by M.K. Raina of Bhar Duhai, which was a translation of Yeli Dak Salam. It was so relevant, and he was weaving in the old myth of what the Bhans used to do when they would perform Akanandun and raise Akunandan from death, resurrect him, and then when their own son dies, they can't do the same. It was a tragedy, but beautiful production in Delhi. I'm sure all of you must have seen it also. Now we'll come back to you, Kemusab, after a little while. But meanwhile, we have another panelist, Mr. Ashok Jailkhani, who also has a distinguished career in the field of arts and you see artistic activity. As director of Doordarshan, he has produced many plays, including Kemusab's. And then, since then, of course, he's a writer also, I believe. And even now, I'm sure he's doing many things which we are not aware of. But please do publicize whatever you are doing so that we can keep abreast of what all is happening. And another thing I wanted to tell Mr. Ravi ji that Kashmiri is being taught in schools these days in Kashmir, which is essential that they have to read and write Kashmiri. But the tragedy is that because they don't speak it at home, they think of it as a foreign language, which is for them the most difficult subject in the school. That is the irony of it. But we have to, through translation, acquaint our new generation also of the gems of literature that we have so that they can go back to the original. Now, can I come to you, Mr. Jailkhani, please?
Yeah, thank you, madam, for giving me this chance. And Pankaj and Ravi, namaskar. As far as these two plays are concerned, both of them are undoubtedly are very good plays. And the main and important thing is that Mr. Pankaj Bhan has brought these plays into English language, which is a great effort. I know, as every speaker has said, translation, particularly from Kashmiri to English, is a difficult task. And considering the plays of Mr. Kemmu, when they are based on folk style, you have a lot of colloquial language, and getting that into English, palatable English, readable English, makes the task even more difficult. But as a reader, I found this book a very easy read, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I would wish that, I know it is a tall wish, that some more plays of Mr. Kemmu are brought out into English. You see, as far as theatre and drama movement in Kashmir is concerned, Motilal Kemmu's contribution is singular, unparalleled, and distinct. And in our own place, that is Jammu and Kashmir. He is well known. He is well known outside the state also. But still, as a whole, you know, drama writing, when you compare it with short story or maybe poetry, it is a very, very difficult task. And every genuine theatre group, not only in J&K, in the entire country, it for them it's a very difficult task to find a good script. There is shortage and dearth of good scripts. So writers, works of writers like that of Mr. Kemmu, and maybe there are a few more, not much, not many, in Kashmiri, whose plays, if available in translations in English or Hindi, they might get into the national scene, and the plays may get staged outside J&K. So, enriching the drama scene as a whole. I have very personal equations and of with Mr. Kyomu. You see, he was much senior to me by age and experience. I started my theater activity when I was around 16 years of age, maybe 68, 69. And that time, Mr. Kemmu was the cultural officer with J&K Cultural Academy. And in lieu of that, one of his main responsibility was to look after the Tagore Hall, which was the only auditorium available in Kashmir for staging plays. And most of the time, he would sit in his office in Tagore Hall. And we, as college students and amateurs, whenever we went and wanted to stage a play, so we would meet him. And one peculiar and very pleasant thing about him was that he was always very encouraging to all youngsters. That included me also. And he would help and oblige. And, we would go to him with our main request would be that supposing we are doing a play tomorrow, it was very difficult for us as amateurs to pay the rent for the hall, book the auditorium for one day, but we would require the auditorium. We would try and get some more time to erect the sets, to design the lighting, to do some kind of blocking. So we would request Mr. Kemmu, sir, please allow us some hours in the evening, one night before, one day before, so that we do erect some set and all that. So that, though it was not official, but most of the time he would oblige, understanding our difficulties because he himself was a theatrist. And, on a personal note, when I started doing theater, in those days, the society was different, the values were different. So my father didn't approve of it. He was not happy. He thought I'm bunking my studies, not paying enough attention. So somehow he met Mr. Kemmu once, and he must have passed on his grudge about me to him and told him that, my son is not paying attention to studies. He's doing now some kind of nautanki, some theatre and all that. And which I learned later, Mr. Kemmu had told him, don't worry about him. Let him loose. He will find his way. He will find his mark. So I realized that at a certain stage, my father no longer spoke to me about, kind of, you're wasting your time and you're not studying and all that. So there was a certain change. But at that time, I didn't realize the reason. So once, after a few months, I again went to Tagore Hall we were doing a play, and as usual met Mr. Kemmu. And Mr. Kemmu told me in Kashmiri, he's not studying, he's not doing anything. So मैंने उनको बता दिया कि कोई परवाह नहीं है, वो अपना रास्ता खुद ढूंढेगा. So then I realized maybe this is the reason that my father is now kind of satisfied and he's not bothering me too much about it. And the one more thing, it has been said about his contribution to folk and theatre in Kashmir as a whole, it is undoubtedly unparalleled and very distinct. He was a committed dramatist and theatrist. One of his advantages was he was one of the early birds to get some kind of training in dance and drama. Maybe the first, or maybe that time his contemporaries, maybe Radhakrishnan Braru, and there was one Mr. Shamlal Bahar, who had been trained in the National School of Drama. So, as a writer, that must have helped him because when you write a stage play, if you are well versed with the stage craft, that gives you an added edge and it makes your writings more powerful. You're able to exploit the options of theater, the theatrical experience much more effectively. So that advantage Mr. Kemmu has had, and it is reflected in all his writings. Now, I can imagine his commitment to theater and drama when television came into existence in Srinagar. It was the second station after Delhi in 70s, and all the writers who used to earlier write for radio or maybe for drama stage, they switched on to television, probably because of more money, probably because of instant fame. Mr. Kemmu never did. He continued with his theater activities, particularly with his involvement with bands, and that too with a particular group, that is Akingam Theatre Group, which was run by Mohammed Subhan Bhagat. And Mohammed Subhan Bhagat and me also enjoyed a good relation because it was me who brought his plays to television. I produced a couple of plays, maybe 4 or 5, when I was a drama producer in Srinagar Doordarshan, and that stint lasted for about 10 years. So Mohammed Subhan Bhagat used to tell me about his interactions with Mr. Kemmu and how Mr. Kemmu used to guide them. The important thing was that he had a firm conviction in the power of folk theatre, the power of band theatre for messaging, for delivering a certain impact. And he remained committed to it, and he used it very effectively, not only in his writings, but his another major contribution is that the folk theatre groups, he helped them to make them more contemporary, in terms of the scripts, in terms of the art of presentation, and it really helped. And this was acknowledged to me by Mohammed Subhan Bhagat also personally. And all in all, I would say a very pleasing, a charming personality with a smile always on his face, very, very encouraging to one and all. And of course, I would, as Mr. Pankaj said initially, his work and his still need much more acknowledgement than they have so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jailkhani. You gave us a personal account of how much interest he took in promoting theatre in Kashmir and also in grooming people to follow this profession and also to bring the work of these bards like Mohammed Subhan Bhatt and all to prominence and giving them the respectability that they certainly deserve. Thank you very much for all your reminiscences. Now I would like, if there is time, for Pankaj to read out something from the book so that we get a flavor. Listeners, whoever is watching the program, gets a flavor of what these plays are about. I mean, we have talked about the themes, but the texture and other things will come out when Pankaj reads out from one of the plays, or both of them a little. Is that all right, Pankaj? We have talked about the themes, but the texture and other things. Yes, can you hear me, Pankaj? Did you hear my request? He can't hear me, possibly? He can't hear. Please, this is a technical glitch. Can something be done? Hello, Usha ji, can something be done about it?
Pankaj ji, can you hear us?
Slow. Very slow, very slow.
Okay.
I don't know, the volume is not good. I don't know why.
Professor Mattoo wants you to read some excerpts from the book.
From
I'll read an
both the
excerpt from the
plays.
book, but I hope you can, it's audible to you.
Yes,
Is it?
you are loud and clear.
Now we
Yeah.
can hear you. Now we can hear you, but please do read so that we get an idea of the flavor of this book. You see, because there are many people who are watching this program who may not have read it. But if you read a few short excerpts from both the plays, it'll be useful, and we can also enjoy it. Please.
See, I'll read a.
You heard me now?
Yes. I'll read a rather long, it's rather longish, but I'm sure it'll give me 5 minutes time to read it out. Do we have the time? 5 minutes for that? Professor Mattoo, do we have the time? 5 minutes.
Yes. Please
I
go ahead,
think
sir.
we have time. Of course
There's a
we have
passage
time.
from the there's a passage for the play Curse. But before I start reading, I'll have to give the context first. Well, it's a long dialogue between Queen Mother and Lord Krishna. Queen Mother's husband and son, both were killed, of course, at different times, and she holds Krishna responsible for it. She calls Krishna a devious person, one who doesn't play by the rules of the game in war. In response, Krishna is patient, calm, and in a philosophical way, he explains why and in what circumstances those tragedies took place. At the end of the dialogue, Queen Mother is convinced of the logic, the reasons given for it, and she becomes a devotee of Lord Krishna. Now, this is Queen Mother speaking. Addressed to Shri Krishna, no, I won't call you anybody's savior. I know you as my son's killer. Yes, I am Damodar's mother. Why did you use Sudarshan Chakra on my son? To rule over the entire country? Why should anyone hail you? Senior Minister, Mother, kindly get to your grief now. Shri Krishna is Yoga Purush, the God incarnate. Queen Mother, he may be a God for you, but not for me. First it was Balram who killed my husband in a treacherous manner. Then it was Shri Krishna who killed my son by using the Sudarshan Chakra, the ultimate weapon in his armory. I lost my husband and my son to his machinations. Krishna, can you ever fathom the grief of a woman who lost both her husband and her son in quick succession and has become utterly desolate in this world? Who will offer me water at the time of death? Shall my soul always remain unsatisfied for want of it? She clenches her fist. Krishna, I curse you that you should have no one to offer water to you in your last moments. Remember, this is my curse, the curse of a grief-stricken woman. She loosens her fist and cries bitterly. Shri Krishna, you have cursed me and I'll gladly bear its consequences. But please get over your grief. You are a mother figure for all. Whatever has happened was terrible. I tried to stop the war by all means at my command. Queen Mother, that's not true. All this happened because of the Sudarshan Chakra that you wield. You always wanted to terrify the world with it. With this weapon in hand, you ensured that everyone called you all-powerful, all-knowing, possessor of supernatural powers, etc., etc. Till you have this weapon with you, you can browbeat the entire world. I am sorrowful today because I am weak, while you have the supreme weapon with you. Shri Krishna, I possess the weapon, but I am not all-powerful. I am tied to my karma. Whenever humanity gets in danger, I am bound to use that weapon. Queen Mother, I know that what human welfare you undertake. Don't use human welfare as a mask to achieve your selfish goals. What human welfare are you talking about? Arrogant Krishna, you will bring about destruction of the whole universe. Shri Krishna, Mother, I believe in construction and not destruction. To achieve positive outcomes, I often have to change my forms. My Sudarshan Chakra is meant to usher in world peace and not bring about destruction. It is used as a deterrent to stop war. And if there is no war, peace and prosperity will prevail in this world. Queen Mother, such high-sounding ideas sound good, but cannot hide reality. I know you and your brother Balram are aspiring to become emperors and then performing Ashwamedha Yajna to flaunt your powers. Shri Krishna, Mother, rest assured, we have no interest in possessing worldly powers. We only want adharma to end and dharma as symbolized by knowledge, truth, and righteous behavior, to spread its light all over the world. We want peace and prosperity for the human race. Queen Mother, I know your motives and the tactics you employ to achieve them too well, getting emotional. Your high-sounding rhetoric is meaningless. In my life, I see nothing but desolation, endless, limitless desolation, and you are the cause of my desolation. Sri Krishna, Mother, birth and death are the principles of creation. This cycle is predestined, and even gods cannot change it. Therefore, get rid of your doubts and dilemmas. Have a peaceful heart. Go back to your country and prepare for Yashomati's coronation. Queen Mother, with firmness, yes, Krishna, will go back to Kashmir, but a sorrowful heart gets distracted and fails to see its path clearly. Shri Krishna, no, Mother, the path of duty gets clearer when you walk on it fearlessly and without distractions. You are a Kshatriya woman. You are brave and resolute. You have to follow Raj Dharma, the duty of a ruler towards its people. Be firm in starting the path of righteousness. Queen Mother, yes, Krishna, how can I do otherwise?
Okay, Pankaj, once again, I must compliment you for the quality of your translation. It reads so well,
Thank you.
and you've done a wonderful job. Once again, I must tell you. Do we have time for him to read another extract from the other play? I don't know. I'm waiting for somebody to prompt me whether we have time.
Yes, please. Yes, yes. Please go ahead.
Okay, so Pankaj, after a break,
Need somebody
we'll
else
ask
to
you
read it out. Need somebody
we-
else to read it out. It's not for me.
No, I must go to the other panelists also for their
Yes, yes.
concluding remarks.
Yes.
Ravi ji, hello, can you hear me, Ravi ji?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
I can
thank
hear
you
you.
so much. Okay. Now I would like you to give your concluding remarks. What do you think? Do you think this discussion we are having today is in any way a tribute to your father, or does it leave much to desire?
Yeah, this is a beginning of paying tribute to some legendary writers from J&K, and I am so happy that my father is the first one in the queue. And I know there's so much. There's so much, like I told you about my father. He has always been in the quest of writing new things, interpreting in the new forms, looking for new generations to join, and sharing the experience of whatever he had gathered from his studies from childhood to his old age, and share it with the new generations. Like in my earlier comments, I forgot one thing, that when in the militancy period, that the bands were not able to perform in Kashmir. From 90 to 94, there was totally lockout of theatrical performances, and bands were they were striking. They were trying very much to do something, but they were idle. Then they used to come and talk to him. They used to call him. He said, "Okay." There's one thing which is still going even in the period of militancy, that is the marriages. He just said, "Yes, sir, marriages are going on." He said, "Now you people go and sing, wo chakri gari ban ke aap jate ho, and you sing on the Mehndi Rats and other things." He said, "Yes." Then he wrote plays in, the style, that what we call when he wrote Himal Negrai and Akanandun in that form, and he prepared them. And then they used to go on the marriages and perform full night on Akanandun and Himal Negrai. And it created history. In that militancy period, there was a group from Mumbai. They performed Himal Negrai about 3,000 shows. And there were certain audiences who were regular audiences to these marriages. They will always come and watch. Then they will come and ask Kemmu Sabi, "Why, sir, aise ho raha hai?" He said, "There is a woman who comes and she inquires, where are we performing tonight?" And she reaches everywhere. And she cries. Then they asked him, they asked the lady, "What's so fascinating about this play that you come everywhere?" She said, "It perhaps tells me my story, because I lost my husband. I'm looking for that." So what I mean to say is, even at the militancy period, when you have nothing to perform, you are not allowed to perform, he found a way, he found a form and he wrote the plays, 4 or 5 plays in that, and he asked them to perform it. Similarly, there was a period like Jailkhani Sahab said, when we were doing theatre in Kashmir, so there was dearth of female actresses. In the Band Pathar, there is no permission for females to act, but in city also there were dearth of actresses. So when this thing came to his mind, he started writing play where there was no lady actress needed. Like I remember Manzil is one of them, because there's no lady actress. Trono is another. कोई जरूरत ही नहीं है lady actress की. लेकिन when I did Manzil, I had a lady, so I converted the king into queen. So I interpreted it at that time. So I think the more we speak about Kemmu Sahab is very less, because he has multiple folds of personality, not as a writer only, because he was an actor. He knew the stagecraft very well. He had little hold on poetry. He was a master of Kashmiri language, and he had abundant knowledge. I'll say, if not of the whole India or the world, but he was an encyclopedia of Kashmir. Because even in the travel, when he used to travel and go somewhere, he used to tell me, on the right side is a river Falana, and on the left side there is a Nag. And if he would do excavation at this place where Avantipur, we'll get a lot of temples and idols or something about our culture and this thing. So he was totally fascinated about the history of Kashmir, culture and everything about Kashmir. वो सुबह उठते थे कश्मीर के साथ और शाम को सोते थे कश्मीर के साथ. लेकिन ये भी अनफॉर्चुनेट है that जितना उनको मिलना चाहिए था नहीं मिला, but he has no regrets about it, because all the time he was saying, what I am writing, you people should do it, perform it and learn. Whether I get the benefits, awards or not, they don't matter to me. So in that perspective, he was not in the race with anyone, he was in the race with himself. I request Pankaj, whenever he gets time, and I will request him that if he is interested in translating any other things of Kemmuji, please let me know and I'll help you in that. Particularly, there's one series of novel he has written about Pashu Gatha. Pashu Gatha is about a history of Kashmir spoken through animals. Which was the beauty of Motilal Kemmu's writing, because he will never write directly anything. You have to interpret it to time. That's why it's everlasting. It will never die. Because even in Manzilnik, when he talks about corruption, when he talks about the government coming from father to son or father to mother to son, he never used it directly. The boy coming from cradle for 20 years, he was in the cage and then he becomes a ruler. He never talked directly anything, but he interpreted in his own imagination. So similarly in this novel I am telling you, there's a series, Pashu Gatha. Just read it. You'll love it. You'll be thrilled to translate it. It's such a beautiful, and when interpreted, then it's a very high intellectual material. And if seen through the animals, it's a child material. बच्चों की कहानी है जिसमें घोड़ा भी, गधा भी, हिरन भी है, सियार भी है, शेर भी है, donkey भी है, but they represent our different communities and classes of our society, particularly in JNK. If you write it with that interpretation, you will come to know who were our rulers and what happened to us. And he has used it properly, like one pal. Just we say there's some one pal, who is one pal. We know it. And so feel free to translate anything. There's a lot of material. And I think if you would have been alive, you would have been thrilled and he would have been thankful to you for translating these books into his plays into English. And I think when time comes, we can keep on meeting and we can discuss. There's one more job which is there are 3 plays which are incomplete. And I have requested Gauri Shankar Rana to help me in completing. There's a play, another part of historical play called Mihir Sen. Mihir Sen is almost completed. Then he has written Annapurna Suya. Suya is incomplete. Mihir Sen is almost complete. But there's another one which I can't read. It's in Kashmiri. So I told Gauri Shankar Rana, you come spend some 15 days. Let's look into the papers, because I knew that he was writing 3-4 plays on the Raj Tarangni which are still incomplete. So Pankaj, you can join us and we can make a team to make his dreams come true and leave something for our future generations. If they can't reach Raj Tarangni, if there's no teacher for them to teach them about history, there are at least plays. One thing I really want to compliment you for these translations is, like, I'm an actor also. And when an actor reads the play, he reads the dialogues which are the dialogues of a character, which are not the dialogues of literature. So once I was reading the meter and the pauses and the grammar you are taken care of, it's like I felt like I should perform some of the scenes in English also. Because I didn't find it difficult to. Otherwise, when you translate, the actor says, yeah, there's a lot of literature found because it's not a spoken language. I don't know where to take a pause, where to take a comma, where to emphasize, and what to do where. Because it doesn't come on the tongue. So the dialogues have to come on the tongue, and they should be the dialogues spoken by the character, not by the imagination of the writer or the translator. Because sometimes the writers or the translators try to put their knowledge behind the characters' themes. So that way, it's excellent. Like you were reading Abhi Krishna ka dekh rahe ho. The language, the words you have chosen, the commas, the grammar, because grammar basically is for drama only. That's what I believe in. English or Hindi, grammar is for speech. Otherwise, grammar may not have any importance. How you speak, where to pause, where is the question mark, where is exclamation. So the actor enjoys that. So take this as a compliment, and I really congratulate you
I
on
feel
keeping
humbled,
that
sir.
meter dialogues.
Thank you, Kemmu. Thank you, Ravi very much. And I
Thank you.
agree with you that Kemmu Saab's plays have an allegorical element in it. They have a symbolic thing in it, and that is why it makes them timeless. That is why they are relevant in all ages and everywhere. And of course, I'm very happy with the quality of translation, which I sampled from the book. But of course, he read it out also very well. You sounded like an actor, Pankajji. Really. Now, thank you so much, Raviji, for shedding light on so many things about Kemusa which we didn't know, which we had no way of knowing. But you see, the one thing that strikes me now after you have given a description of his multifaceted personality, that he was a gentleman who was thoroughly contented. He might have been unhappy with the turn that history was taking, but as far as his personal life was concerned, he didn't have that kind of an ambition that I should shine or people should compliment me. He took pleasure in his work. That is what made him happy. And I'm sure if he is watching us somewhere today, he'll be really happy that at least his work is being talked about and people have looked at it in such a perceptive way, in different ways, and shown their appreciation. So finally, Ashokji, the one thing I want to conclude, Pankajji, you have been paid a compliment, but remember that this is a challenge also. You have to do the other plays. You have to. And looking at the work that you have done, I'm tempted to attempt one play myself.
That's it. That's it. That's very nice.
I'll enjoy doing it if provided life spares me. I'm also an elderly person now. But translation, because as a translator myself, I know the challenges, but I also know that you have to steep yourself in a culture in order to bring out the nuances and everything. But I think, as far as I'm concerned, I'm thoroughly satisfied with this session. But I would like Jailkhani Saab to say his concluding remarks, and then we'll wind up.
Well, as I said earlier, as far as dramatics is concerned, drama, particularly in our state, a pioneering contribution, a distinct style, and as I mentioned earlier, I would, and as Raviji also mentioned, I would like more of his works to get translated. And one very heartening thing about his works is that most of his plays are very, very contemporary. Means if they are staged 10 years hence, they will still look relevant. I will just quote one play which Raviji also mentioned casually, that was Manzilnik. So it was produced by Rangmanch Dramatic Club. I was a member of that in sometime in 68, 69. a kid is kept in a cradle and he's kept in darkness, then he becomes the king. So most of his plays are allegorical. Even if it is staged now, it will be relevant to the situation in Kashmir. It will be relevant to many issues which India is facing in terms of literacy, in terms of awareness, in terms of exploitation. So that is one special feature about Mr. Kemmu's works, that they transcend, most of those works transcend time, and they're relevant. And that is, as a dramatist, and as I again emphasized, because I had a very personal relation with them. When I started Jammu Doordarshan Kendra after migration in 1992, and Mr. Kemmu had also shifted to Jammu. Now, to his, as you mentioned, Neerja, about his passion and commitment, he enjoyed everything he did. I assigned him a job which was to monitor our programs, whatever Jammu Doordarshan was telecasting. It was a telecast of about 2 hours daily, because the station had just started. We started with half an hour, then 2 hours. Now it's a full-fledged station. So I, along with Mr. Kemmu and other experts from Jammu, some literary figures, I requested them to monitor our programs and give a detailed report of the quality of programs, everything from announcements to language to quality of discussion, content. And he was so prompt, if his assignment was for today evening's transmission, next day early morning, he would come all the way, traveling 7-8 kilometers. There were no mobile phones then, come by Matador and deliver that report to me next day, promptly at 10 a.m. in my chamber. This is your yesterday's transmission report. And he enjoyed it. I think that continued for about a year or so. So, and then, as I said, as a youngster, we looked up to him, always a smile, always giving good suggestions, whosoever went to him. And he would always be happy in the company of youngsters. And when he would see that passion in them, to wanting to do theater, and he was always helpful. A great man. Thank you.
Would any
Thank
one
you
of
very
you
much.
like to, Neerja, there is a question which
Yes.
2-3 people have asked in different forms, but I have just combined it in one, and says, what is so
Yes.
unique to Bandapathar? Is Bandapathar still being practiced with the same fervor?
Of course.
Yes, please. Raviji wants to, yeah. Okay.
Raviji,
please.
you can talk about it, but I am a witness to the fact that since I still live in Kashmir, that it is performed and it has become more relevant with time. Because you see, the messages they deliver as I told you, in a symbolic, allegorical way, reach the core of people's hearts, and they react and they enjoy this thoroughly. And Raviji, of course, will talk
Yeah, I'll
about
tell
it.
you about 5-6 things about this form. What is unique about the Bandapathar is basically an outcome of an Indian classical theatre that we call Sanskrit theatre. Because when there was Hinduism in Kashmir, so this form of classical theatre where they used to enact the episodes from Mahabharata, Ramayana, and other religious books, so they used to perform it. But the coming of Islam to country, they were all deprived of doing this thing, so they lost the passion, they lost the scripts, they lost profession. So they went in the sharan of Darweshes. So the whole content of the Bandapathar turned to be social satires. So then it became that we have got Pathars, which are basically nothing except the satire on communities. Like we have Vatal Pathar, we have Darza Pathar, we have Gosain Pathar, which is satire on Gosains. Then we have got Bhatta Pathar, we have got Bakarwal Pathar, Hans Pathar. So, and the whole rasa became only comic, because they couldn't talk about anything else. They couldn't talk about religious, they couldn't talk about heroes, they couldn't talk about anything. So they transformed, the whole content was the satire on the communities. It's a time when Kemmu Saab rediscovered it. So he wrote modern plays based on this form. And after that, very less experiments of writing modern plays on this form were done. After Kemmu Saab, what happened is that all these communities have grown. Now, Hans are not Hans, they are educated people. Vatul is not a Vatul, there are IS officers from that community. Bakarwals are not Bakarwal. Now these objections are coming from these communities that they don't want that, cheap rated satire on them, because they have also grown, they are educated. So now what happens is the Band Perthar people are finding shortage of their content because they cannot perform many Perthars. Like I was making a documentary in 2009 when there was a militancy and there was a Talibanis, but all our radicalization was happening. So there was a Perthar which talks about, that's called there are some Arabic characters in that Perthar. So I asked them to perform and they refused. They said, we can't do it this time because we'll get killed. I said, okay, let's do it in the hiding. But still, one of the groups who many encouraged them and they performed it. So I have that rare footage of that Perthar. So with that passage of time, things are becoming difficult for them in the terms of content, because they have no freedom of choosing content. Now what happens is today, they are taking what the 20 Sutri Karyagram or 25 Sutri Karyagram of the government is to propagate, Sharab Bandi, Falana Bandi, Timkana Bandi, and Khana Purti. Because they have lost a teacher. So there's nobody who can guide them, and there are the number of groups has increased. The form is still there, but the soul is lost. The content is lost. They are not getting new plays. The last play which I asked Kemmu Sahab to write in the Band Perthar Shaili was Armin Perthar, where I wanted to talk about the environmental and ecology. So I said this is a Perthar which is very related with the present day scenario, where the villages are disappearing, rivers are becoming dry, animals are getting killed, forests are being conquered. So he wrote this play, which we did in the National Festival of National School of Drama, called Armin Perthar. So then I keep on telling them that you have to find new writers, because a couple of workshops were done by him, unless until they fiddle around with the content. Otherwise, the people will get bored because there's nothing new coming out of it. So that is the problem they are facing, which I am also realizing. And I promised a couple of groups that I'll give you time, will work, but I don't know when it will happen. Maybe when COVID will go over. So that is a little scene of worry, because otherwise the new generation will lose thread with that. So that's why they are performing it, but there is something missing. I think that is an answer to your question in short.
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to say something now. The way we are looking at Kemmu Saab's plays has to be expanded. Like Shakespeare can be read through the prism of race, through the prism of caste, through the prism of gender, through the prism of liberalism and conservatism. In all these ways, he's been looked at and analyzed. So what we need, apart from our own little bit as lay persons, is a kind of critical study. If Raviji, you can commission somebody to do a critique of his works from these different angles, it would be a very enriching thing, because that's the way to preserve his work and also give it a universal relevance and appeal. We talk, and you see, and thanks to Pankajji's efforts, if it is available in English, that so much the better, so that people can, a wider section of people can read it. Because you see, they are any contemporary poet, Aga Shahid Ali, is being critiqued. So many books are being written about his work. That's the kind of work we need about Kemmu Saab also. So that all these different facets of what he was trying to do, resurrecting history, resurrecting our own cultural forms and other things, all that is such an extremely valuable contribution. But it has to be assessed in a formal, critical way, so that the rest of the world knows about his work. That's all I can say. And once again, thank you so much. I don't know about you all, but I have thoroughly enjoyed myself.
We all enjoyed. I really enjoyed.
Okay. Should we call it a day then?
Yes, we can.
Thank
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much once again, and I hope we can meet in person also. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Come to Srinagar. Come to Srinagar.
Thank you.